Hi, and welcome to No Place Like It, a podcast on fictional homes. I'm your host, Talia Ulrich, and together we'll be exploring the ins and outs of imagined living spaces. It's the 1920s, and we're spending some time in the French Riviera in Switzerland, courtesy of F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel, Tender is the Night. I promise there are no spoilers ahead for those of you who haven't read it. The only thing I'll tell you right now is it's a tragedy in the vein of The Great Gatsby, so don't be expecting any happy endings. Fitzgerald opens the novel with a description of the hotel, large, proud, and rose-colored, with a bright and tan beach in front, which he likens to a prayer rug. Although he gives a fictional name to the hotel, Gosse's Hôtel des Étrangers, it's actually based on the very real Hôtel du Cap et des Morts. Since it's on the French Riviera, it's typically closed for the summer, but an American couple named the Divers have convinced the owner to keep it open for the season. The Divers are Richard and Nicole, although Richard is exclusively referred to by his nickname Dick. So I'm not sure if this episode needs an explicit content warning attached to it, but I'm just throwing it out there that when I mention Dick, I'm talking about Richard and not any other kind of Dick out there. It takes a special kind of power couple to keep a resort open during its off-season, but the Divers are said to have invented the Hôtel des Étrangers. Apparently, keeping staff and taking guests has proved profitable for the hotel, which is in its second year of staying open for the Divers. Although Dick and Nicole are responsible for keeping the hotel open during the summer, they don't actually live there. Instead, they live in a house they built called the Villa Diana. Their house is located on a hill above the hotel, indicating the Divers' influence over it. What's interesting about the Divers' relationship is the multi-layered power dynamics, and not just in the way they hold power over others, but specifically over each other. Nicole is mentally ill, and Dick is her psychologist, which I'm assuming is one of many, many relationships that eventually led to the establishment of ethics and principles for psychologists 30 plus years later. Nicole is incredibly rich, and she's the one who has paid for everything in their shared life. Dick owns his workhouse and his clothes and books, and he pays for himself when he travels alone. But Nicole is the one with the financial power in their family. She's the one who owns their house and all their belongings. In their house stands a piano, presumably paid for by Nicole. One scene shows Dick starting to play a song before considering the effect this particular song may have on Nicole's mental health. He stops playing and leaves the piano, reflecting that his inability to play a song he wants to play means his life is, quote, being refined to a point. In this scene, we see the hold Nicole has over him, both financially and also in a strange way, professionally. Since Dick is the psychologist, the power he holds is clear as a doctor treating his patient. Yet, he must consider every single one of his actions as it affects his wife's mental illness, even down to which songs he can play the piano. It's a strange and dysfunctional relationship where the balance of power is very heavily weighted in favor of the one or the other and never really reaches a steady equilibrium. This dysfunction is not immediately evident at the beginning of the novel, but becomes more and more clear as the story progresses. It should be noted that we don't actually go into the diver's house until well into the second part of the novel. In the first part, only one person besides the divers themselves goes into the house, Violet McKisco, and what she sees in there kicks off a series of wild events that includes a duel with actual pistols. During a party at the diver's Villa Diana, the partygoers are located outside on the terrace. At some point in the evening, Dick and Nicole go inside, after which Violet announces she wants to go to the bathroom. In a few moments, she returns to the terrace, hurrying away from the house and seemingly full of news. However, before she could tell anyone what she'd seen or heard, a fellow guest, Tommy Barbin, stands up and says it is inadvisable to discuss whatever is happening in the house. For all of the first part of the novel, questions surrounding the secret of what happened in the house continue to crop up. What did Violet see? Why can't she tell anyone? What actress Rosemary Hoyt knows for sure is that she saw something in the bathroom, and eventually Rosemary herself finds out in the diver's hotel bathroom what their secret is. Although Dick and Nicole have their own house overlooking the hotel, they do have a room there, which is across from Rosemary's room. A day after Rosemary's birthday, she tries to get comfortable with Dick and he kisses her, but when she invites him into her room, his attitude changes into something more paternal when she attributes to Nicole's presence in the diver's room just down the hall. While Nicole is not actually spotted in this scene, it is clear the influence she has over Rosemary and Dick, even while sleeping behind a closed door in another room across the hall. It's only once Rosemary realizes their secret that she sees how much power Dick has in his marriage, when he talks to Nicole as her doctor rather than as her husband. Thus far, we've seen how people maintain control over their relationship through their living spaces, and now it's time to take a look at how the spaces themselves can, in some way, control us. At one point, Rosemary goes into her room and immediately has the feeling she is not alone in there. Fitzgerald describes this feeling in a passage which I'm going to read now. In an inhabited room, there are refracting objects only half noticed, varnished wood, more or less polished brass, silver and ivory, and beyond these 1,000 conveyors of light and shadow so mild that one scarcely thinks of them as that. The tops of picture frames, the edges of pencils or ashtrays, of crystal or china ornaments, the totality of this refraction appealing to equally subtle reflexes of the vision as well as to those associational fragments in the subconscious that we seem to hang on to as a glass fitter keeps the irregularly shapes that may do sometime. It's a long-winded way of saying she probably saw the other person in a reflection. But I think he's also making an excellent point here about the subconscious as it relates to the room its body is in. When we stay in any place, whether it's where we live or where we're staying for a bit, we retain a mental picture of our surroundings, If things are different from our mental picture, we know something is off, even if we don't know what it is yet. Seeing something different in a half-noticed way, like a shadow reflected in a picture frame, is going to alert your subconscious to a change, but it wouldn't be fully realized the way that a reflection in a full-length mirror would. Fitzgerald is drawing a direct connection between the subconscious and the barely noticed objects in the room to indicate how our spaces hold power over our minds in ways we don't notice. We've explored a bit of the French Riviera and will now head to Switzerland after a time gap of a few years, where Dick Diver's psychology practice is located and where the Diver family now lives, next door to the psychiatric clinic. The clinic is set up more as a village than as a single building. It's beautiful, and the narrator tells us that every psychologist passing through the city stops by to visit. There's a main building, a truck farm, and 3 workshops for ergotherapy, such as carpentry, bookbinding, beadwork, weaving, and brasswork. There are also 2 houses described as being for those sunk in eternal darkness. These houses are called the Eglantine and the Beaches, and they're screened from the main building. Outwardly, they seem cheerful, but the inside has been decorated with concealed grills and bars and immovable furniture, ensuring as much as possible the safety of its mentally ill inhabitants. The person responsible for decorating the clinic's buildings is Nicole, and it is frequently brought up that one reason Dick and his friend Franz can own the clinic is because Nicole is their financial backer. Once again, the balance of power is too heavily on the side of one partner, and it takes a toll on their relationship. The narrator tells us it is lonely for Nicole to own Dick, especially when he did not want to be owned. Dick occasionally finds some reprieve from this relationship where his wife owns him. However, he maintains power over Nicole as her doctor, which in turn irritates her. It's a tragically imbalanced relationship, which is reflected in their surroundings, and it must give way entirely to one of them or else implode. Become part of the listener support community by clicking the link in the podcast description. For 99 cents a month, you can nominate any fictional works for future episodes. For $4.99 a month, you can nominate any fictional works for future episodes and receive links to discussion boards and group watches. For $9.99 a month, you can nominate any fictional works for future episodes and receive links to discussion boards and group watches, as well as get access to exclusive merch. Today, we saw some dysfunctional power imbalance, and in 2 weeks, we'll be looking at the powerfully dysfunctional Roy family's home and workspaces in the television series Succession. The script and research references for today's episode are available at acutelittleshop.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, rate, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you use for podcasts. Thank you so much for listening.